Welcome to DAT Poker Podcast. Ross here, and I just wanted to put a little disclaimer in the beginning of the show. There was a little audio issue between about the 3rd and the 8th minute. You might hear some static. If it bothers you, you can just fast forward, but it's not that bad. I figured I'd just leave it in there. And while I'm here, as usual, I would like to take this opportunity to say that if you're enjoying the show, and I really hope that you are, please rate it in your podcast app, which I'm sure you have open on your phone right now, and share our tweets, retweet our tweets, and help get the word out so that we can grow the show as much as possible. Thank you. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, everybody, to DAT Poker Podcast, episode number 5, presented by Daniel Negreanu's Masterclass of Poker. It's September 18th. I'm your host, A. Schwartz, alongside producer Roscoe P. Coltrane.
Hey, how are you?
Mr. Terrence Chan. T, how are you, sir?
Absolutely wonderful on this sunny fall day in the central Okanagan. How about you?
And Daniel Negreanu in Las Vegas. Daniel, how are you, sir?
I'm ready to go on a motherfucking rant today, boys. This is a good one here. I'm pissed. I read some shit on the internet. It's making me all riled up.
Oh boy, there's nothing like a good I read stuff on the internet to get you fired up. I mean, it's actually poker related. Usually, most of the things that get people super pissed off on the internet today, you know, they're political or something like that. So yeah, let's do it.
Do you guys remember that internet cartoon from like 20 years ago where the wife's in bed and the husband's in the bedroom sitting at his computer and she's like,
oh yeah,
and he's like, honey, somebody on the internet is wrong.
Yeah, XKCD. If you just look up, XKCD, somebody on the internet is wrong. That's fantastic. That's totally the way the world is.
Totally. The challenge is going to be to see if Daniel can get through some of the other topics we're going to talk about before the one he's fired up about. Let's see how he does. But let's kick things off with a couple of fun things. We put out the call today on Twitter for some topics to talk about. We did a show 3, 4, 5 days ago. It hasn't been a complete week, so there's a few things to talk about, but we wanted to reach out, see what other people thought, what they would want to hear about. But the first thing to get to, fight preparation. Terrence, you have a championship battle set for November. When? November
16th in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. November 16th.
This is, give us the belt that you're fighting for.
I am fighting for the Unified MMA 125-pound flyweight title for Unified MMA, co-promoted by XFFC. Unified is the big promotion in Western Canada. They mostly focus on Alberta, so they're bringing me in to fight one of their dudes who's on a 5-fight win streak. So. Training's going good. I'm doing a shit ton of cardio right now because I've never had a 5-round fight before, so I really want to build up that base. It's going well. Just trying to stay injury free and also trying not to be an absentee dad while I train super hard. But it's hard. It's exhausting. We talked. Daniel talked last week about having a dating life and stuff like that when you're training super hard and tired. I'm just exhausted all the time except like 2 days a week, which are my recovery days. So other than that, today Tuesdays are actually my hardest day. So I tried to grab a little 20-minute nap before here because I'm going to be heading back out to the gym right after this one.
All right, let's get into some of the stuff that we want to talk about. First off, on Twitter, some people brought up some stuff that they wanted to hear about. We're going to get to that. Then get caught up with some of the stuff that was going on. There's some there was a kind of a gossipy week. We had some things go sideways out there. One of them was Will Kassouf, everybody's favorite speech play champion, was apparently caught stealing $100 chips from a friend during a drunk night of playing roulette at a casino in Leeds. There's unconfirmed reports out there. His sponsors suspended him while they do an investigation, but those who find Will Kassouf annoying at the poker table might have a little smirk on their face today. We'll wait for details to come out on that.
Late breaking news. He actually just tweeted about it. I just typed Will Kassouf's name into Twitter. Do you want me to read? He's just issued a statement. It's not terribly long. I could read it for you.
Oh.
Okay. So as you mentioned, he was alleged to have stole some chips from a friend. He writes, this is at William Kassouf on Twitter, 35 minutes ago, late breaking. It is with great sadness that I write the following statement, but I feel it necessary to clarify the situation now that I'm at liberty to do so. Last weekend, during the course of a drunken night playing roulette with friends, I made an error of judgment, which I greatly regret. something that I accept full responsibility for. I have apologized and will apologize again to all my friends who were with me that night for my foolish behavior. As a result of this embarrassing incident, my sponsor, Grosvenor Poker, and I have mutually parted ways. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone I've worked with at Grosvenor Poker for all they've done to me, and I'm proud to have been part of Team Grosvenor. I would like to apologize to all my friends, family, fans, and followers for my behavior on this occasion. I accept the consequences of my action and would now like to draw a line under this whole matter and move on. He ends up by saying, I will continue to do what I do best by bringing the fun and entertainment factor back to poker. That's it's most important to me in my poker career. I wish you all the best of luck and look forward to seeing you at the tables.
Like a boss.
So a very contrite and not like a boss, Will Kassouf.
He really didn't handle this like a boss in any way, because a real boss, like if you're going to you lose your sponsor and have your name, you got to get $100K minimum, not $100 chip. Like, what are you doing? Like, if you're going to make a big steal getaway, I have a friend, and I'll interject the story real quickly, and I won't name him because whatever. But this is a guy who lived in LA. He was he had a gambling problem. He was betting sports. Denver was playing Green Bay, and he had a couple bookies, right? So he called his bookie, and one bookie, and he bet like $50,000 on Denver. He called his other bookie and bet $50,000 on Green Bay. So and it was a 3.5 total, so he's going to win one. So of course, what he did is he went and collected the $50K from one bookie, and he moved to the other side of the world and left. So he made $50K for free, like $100. Will, come on, man, that's just silly. It seems like a silly mistake, not only because he didn't steal enough, but like, why would you ever do something like that?
That's a pretty big character flaw, stealing money as well. You're gambling and doing that. That's you're gonna have a hard time getting past that one and putting it behind you, I think.
Yeah, and as Daniel points out, the risk reward is not good there. Like, if you're gonna lose your sponsorship because of it, I mean, if you're in a financial position where you need to try to steal $100 chips, and that sponsorship is probably pretty valuable to you, I would imagine.
Okay, let's get to a couple other things people wanted to ask us about it, and I want to go to Daniel on this one. One of them was the effect of big blind ante on pre-flop opens. Can you maybe touch on that, Daniel, what your general thoughts are about that?
Well, it's funny you mention that, because Brian Rast, when I was playing the Poker Masters this week, that discussion had come up in terms of like what you should do under the gun if you only have one chip. And like, he was vehemently convinced that his idea was that you should play 100% of hands, 7-deuce offsuit or whatever. And I sort of countered that's probably not right. And he was like, I'll bet you. And then like about 10 minutes later, he's like, wait a minute. He's like, okay, maybe you were actually right. Because the thinking behind it is there is going to be some strategic adjustments. One of those is the fact that, so if you just imagine you have like one $100 chip, and the big blind is going to be 800 and the ante is going to be 800. The question is, should you play from under the gun? If you play from under the gun, you have an opportunity to win all of the antes. The problem is, on the very next hand, all those antes go in the pot. And you have to win that hand anyway. So no matter what, you're going to have to win the hand in the big blind. So essentially, if you're that short, you have to win 2 hands in a row, whether it's under the gun and big blind or big blind and small blind. The added benefit of small blind is the big blind, whoever that is going to post the entire ante. So either way, you have to win 2 hands in a row. And the question is, the 7-deuce offsuit in first position makes sense to play? And I think the answer is no. I think actually, I don't know necessarily if you should play tighter, but I think that like, because you have to win 2 hands in a row either way, you want to be reasonable. Now, under the gun +1, that opens up probably like you should be opening wider, because you have the opportunity of, winning that hand, winning the antes, and then winning the next one as well. And then you can get through the blinds without actually, and fold and stuff like that. So yeah, it has some adjustment. There are some adjustments for sure, but it's not so difficult to figure out. And it shouldn't have like vastly different impacts on the game that anyone's like, oh, I don't like this because I don't understand it.
Yes, I guess my question is it worth it? Is it worth, because is the idea behind big blind ante is because everybody has, instead of everybody anteing, one person does, and it saves time. But if it changes the game in some material way, I guess my question is it worth doing it this way for that?
Oh yeah, I mean, because it's so like, here's the bottom line, right? Poker evolves, things change, we adapt to different formats. No Limit Hold'em originally, there was no blinds. It was all just ante. They introduced blinds. So things have changed through time just to make things easier and more comfortable. And this is just another example of that. And again, the effect on the actual gameplay is so minimal. It's only going to affect people that are extremely short, and that haven't gone all in before, like being under the gun or in the blinds, that it's certainly worth it from speed. Like anyone who plays big blind ante format, they're converted instantly. Like we're never going back to the archaic way of everyone antes themselves. I don't think so.
Sorry, Terrence had his mute button on like a dummy. I was trying to get in there. But Daniel, was there any thought when the big blind ante first came out, not making it big blind ante, but instead of making it, say the button or the cutoff for one position? Because one thing I started to think about was that the big blind is such a penalty in that circumstance because they're paying big blind and button big blind and all the antes at the same time. Why not make it, one of the quote unquote more valued positions to be the forced ante for the whole table?
Well, Kerry Katz had two arguments against that. Number one, button ante, sometimes there's no button. Right? Like,
right.
If the small blind goes broke, there just is
last
no button.
Position, I guess.
Yeah, and the other thing that he says, which is a very small adjustment, but it's slightly more efficient, is with big blind ante, that means two people are voluntarily putting in money in pot, whereas with button ante, that's three people that now have to put in money in the pot. Small issue, but overall, like I said, I just don't think it is such a significantly has a significant impact on the game that it makes much difference. And again, it's probably just more efficient to have two people put in chips than three, and there's always a big blind, and there isn't always a button.
My concern also was that there was, and that's a fair point. My concern there was and so if you're talking about like, a 50K high roller or something like that, where there's 4 tables in the whole tournament, it's nothing. But like, let's say if we're introducing this at the World Series in some like 1,500 or 1K buy-in event, there's a lot of people already who dodge their big blind. I feel like, this gives people even more incentive to dodge the big blind. And you can say, yeah, well, we should enforce that. But reality is, if you look around like the Rio, one guy dodging the big blind, it probably doesn't get caught very often. So my whole thing was, I feel like it should almost be like the cutoff would be the optimal situation, because that way somebody coming in between the blinds still has to pay the big blind ante for the table. But I don't know. That was just the way I would do it if I ran the world.
Yeah, I mean, bottom line is what you're describing is somebody who has incentive to cheat right now as a regular format, but they have more incentive to do so when there's big blind ante. And that's true for sure. But like, again, I mean, that's something that we police and monitor anyway, and it's an imperfect system. And I don't think it changes all that much. I mean, you can tell when a guy like walks up to the table, looks around and goes, oh, oops, and then all of a sudden shows up. You're like, okay, bud. I've seen floormen at the World Series, actually penalize guys who do that.
Yeah, but usually like somebody at the table has to catch them. And if you've just got like a table where 8 guys are buried in their phones, then I don't know. I suspect people get away with it more often than we know. We just don't see the times that, you don't get away with it. Although it's fantastic when somebody does get caught. I think my favorite tweet from like 5 weeks ago was some guy getting like a major penalty and him just getting a raging justice boner, which I would get if I ever saw that happen.
RJB, you got an RJB. That's awesome.
Oh, okay. I get justice boners. I mean, they're almost the only kind I get these days.
Another interesting thing that happened this week that people wanted to get our take on was there's a tournament in England that came down to 7 players at the final table. They all agreed to pay the chip leader about 90% of first, and then remove his chips and play out the rest of the tournament, which was granted by the tournament director. So I thought that was sort of an interesting topic about removing the chips from there to finish out the tournament. Obviously, the person who got 90% of first place got a pretty good deal with 7 left. But guys, thoughts on taking chips off the table in that spot?
Yeah. Well, I think certainly when 7 players all agree to something, then it's like there's never a problem with it. But I do think they made the right decision by, like, if they're going to give this guy money and just like eliminate him, it's better to have all of his chips gone rather than him playing like dead blinds, because that's going to have a big effect on one player specifically having the button twice, or another player who's, let's say, in the small blind who's even more vulnerable because he doesn't have like the sort of big blind there. So I think like if you are going to make a move like this, which seems strange in the first place, removing the chips entirely, I think, is better than, leaving that dead stack dribble off and giving like an unfair advantage to a guy who's going to have 2 buttons.
100%. Not only does that guy have two buttons, another strategic adjustment is, so suppose you were the button, you can defend like crazy because you can only be squeezed by the small blind, so there's only one person behind you, and you just get to be in position for the rest of the hand. So like you can flat opens when that guy's in the big blind, when the dead set's in big blind, like just an insane amount. It's a lot like when a guy leaves the table early or something like that. I thought it was I think it's totally kosher. Anytime everybody left in the tournament agrees to a deal, then you can make that deal. Like I mean, as long as nobody was overly bullied into it, I'm totally fine with it. I'm sure the chip leader was perfectly happy with it as well. It mitigates everybody else's ICM risk disaster, and they probably got the tournament done way faster because nobody was trying to hang on until ladder. So I mean, creative job done by those 7 gents and ladies or ladies.
Fantastic. We mentioned it last week. Contendersclothing.com is a great site. If you guys are Rocky fans or Karate Kid fans, there are all kinds of fight shirts and underwear, different clothing, really comfortable stuff. Contendersclothing.com. 20% 20% off, no risk. We're going to hear that shortly on November 18th, I think. No restrictions. Use a promo code KidPoker20. It's going to get you 20% off anything at contendersclothing.com. Check that out.
I'm officially wearing Clubber Lang underwear right now.
Yes.
And a T-shirt that's a Cobra Kai No Mercy T-shirt. So they do have some cool stuff, and I wear it. I love it.
All right. Dan, I know you watch Rocky and stuff, Daniel, before the World Series of Poker to get yourself pumped up. Top 3 Rocky movies in order.
Oh, yeah, you're putting me on the spot. All right. Well, for me, the one that speaks to me most, just because it relates to my career the most, is Rocky 3. And then I go to Rocky 4. Those were like the best of the bunch, I felt. And then the third best Rocky, oh my goodness, that's a really tough one. I don't know if the Creed would count in the Rocky films, but that was a pretty good first attempt at the new sort of series. I'm going to go 3-4-2.
Terrence?
Yeah. If you're counting Creed, then I almost think that, like, as a movie, I mean, Creed was just a fantastic movie. I mean, like that might be it might be hubris almost to say, because it's, I don't know if you consider it part of the series, but Creed as a movie, the standalone movie, is just fantastic. If we're talking about like the main actual proper 5, I'd go 1 first, just, because it's the best, and then maybe just 4 for the over the top campy Cold War stuff, because I think we're all different ages, but we're all sort of in that era of remembering what the Cold War was like and sort of how over the top, silly, villainous the other side, in this case, obviously the Soviet Union was. And the fact that they got a Swedish dude to play a Russian was pretty fantastic.
I must break you.
Drago.
If he dies, he dies. I mean, I don't know how many times we've said, if he dies, he dies in the gym.
Drago's the best because and you touched on it, Terrence, but if you go back, for me, I'm a Drago fan. That's my number 1. And then first movie would be number 2 for me. But we were talking about this recently when Nikolai Volkov died. And you got to think back to, I think it's WrestleMania 3. And I don't know for anybody if you guys were I know Terrence was, I'm not sure about Dana, but WrestleMania fans or WWF fans in the 80s. But for people who don't sort of weren't in, or too young to know or too young to experience that, I think it was WrestleMania 3 in the Detroit Silverdome, where the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, and this is at the height of the Cold War, rode in to fight. I can't remember who they were fighting. It might have been Hogan. But they come in on a golf cart with the Iranian and Russian flags flying, and they come into and they try and get 80,000 people to sing the Russian national anthem. Volkov does. Just an epic moment in sports for me, and I think to Drago as well as to Terrence's point about that movie. But anyway,
So next week we just do like a whole a 80s pro wrestling podcast, right? Like I could go on with this for a while, but I won't, in the interest of people not shooting their iPhones and hitting the unsubscribe button. But yes, my era was, I mean, I'm slightly younger than you guys, so my era was sort of Sergeant Slaughter in the Gulf War, but the politicizing of pro wrestling, or pro wrestling as a reflection of the cultural zeitgeist at the time, was awesome.
Yeah, and I was an absolute wrestling fan. I used to tape it on VHS,
yes.
back in
and watch them over and over, right?
Yeah, totally. Ricky Steamboat, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and of course Hulk Hogan. Oh yeah, and that was Macho Man Randy Savage. The whole group. I mean, I was just a WWF fan back then before they got sued and had to switch it to WWE.
Yeah, they got sued by animal lovers. Daniel, how do you feel about that?
Go animals, yeah.
Go animals. All right, let's jump to the news.
What in the world is going on?
Fake, disgusting news.
Okay, the Trump thing's growing on me, I got to say. I wanted it gone when I first heard it, but it's kind of grown on me a little bit.
Like a boil.
Well said. We last recorded the show. The Poker Masters was coming near to an end, the 2018 version, the second annual. Ali Imsirovic had won event 5. This was the 25K No Limit Hold'em, and he was at the final table of event number 6, the 50K, which he went on to win for $800,000, winning back-to-back Poker Masters events. Pretty impressive. It was time for the final event number 7, the 100K main event. The event only got 25 entries, down 11 entries from last year's 36. David Peters takes that down, wins $1.1 million. And he also wins 2 events for the series, but doesn't quite have enough points to take the title. Ali Imsirovic wins the coveted Purple Jacket for 2018. Daniel, I want to get your take on the overall turnout for the Poker Masters, specifically to the 25 entries to the main event.
Yeah, so I have a lot to say about this, and I've talked to Kerry Katz and Brent Hanks about, what went wrong, if you will, because the events overall were well attended, and then it was just the main event itself. Last week when we were doing the podcast, my plan was to finish the podcast, take a shower, go to the gym, and then go ahead and play. But I checked out Poker News, and I looked at the turnout, and I was like, there's 8 people, and they're all superstars, right? So I was like, well, this seems stupid. I'm not going to go, what's the point of that, right? And so on day 1, they essentially only got about 9 people show up, and the tournament director made the decision to stop early and allow people to buy into day 2, which was already going to be the case. And they ended up filling up with about 25 total, but a lot of those, some of those were reentries, and it was a really bad field. I mean, Kerry Katz is not a professional poker player, but he plays quite well, and he was the only non-pro that played, and so there's a lot of reasons why, right? So one of the thinkings behind it is the 100K was a 3-day event, and typically what we're seeing is businessmen, recreational players don't want to play 3-day events. They're happy to show up for 1, make final table in day 2, but maybe it's a combination of, longer, slower structure gives pros more of an advantage, to also just time spent being in a tournament. So the numbers were down, and I think, according to Kerry, he's just not going to do a 3-day event ever again, unless it's, of course, something like the super high rollerball. So yours truly, I didn't even show up and play because I was like, I don't know. First of all, I haven't been really all that motivated to play poker of late. It's not really a priority on my list right now. Maybe I'll get geared up for next year, but this year is kind of I'm kind of checked out. I've got other things on my mind. But and I figured if that's my mindset, playing against Dan Smith, David Peters, and all the rest, when I don't really feel like being there that much, I figured I'd just save the 100K, which is what I did.
Wasn't it rake free last year, the main event?
Well, it still is.
Oh, it still is.
Free,
okay.
as long as, but the only thing is if you show up on time for all of the events, you pay 0 rake whatsoever. If you rebuy, there's rake on the rebuy, or if you're late, you pay on the second, you pay late. But if you could theoretically play Poker Masters the entire series and pay 0 rake.
Okay.
What do you think the future of the Poker Masters series itself is, Daniel? Obviously, Kerry's involved, Poker Go's involved. That helps a great deal, and it's an event that draws a lot of attention. But I mean, if we're not going to draw players, what do you think the future holds for this series?
Yeah, there was one other thing I didn't mention as far as the numbers being down, and that's simply like WCOOP, right? There's already a bunch of big events on there. So to get guys from, the Germans or whatever to come over, they're like, well, we have a series of events here. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to travel. So changing the time of year that happens, I think is going to help a lot, like a more open slot, maybe in October. But it's a big mistake, I think, for anyone to run against, say, for example, in June, the World Series of Poker, or in the fall, if you're trying to attract high limit, online players, then you don't want to really go against WCOOP because it's usually, a lot of people are going to just stay home in the comfort of their own, living room and play poker. So I think moving the event, but I don't know if there's a lot that can be done. Like, there's no easy formula. And I know we're going to talk about this in the future of like getting more rich people to just magically just give their money away to these high rollers. Like eventually, if they've played 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 and they don't cash, sometimes people are like, you know what? I'm not having fun anymore. I'm just going to go play my big cash games and, without pros.
And then how much do you think this series and others are affected by who makes the final table? So when we put out our call for topics today, a friend of mine follows me on Twitter, said, hey, give me a call. I've got something that I want to talk to you about. So I called him and we talked quickly about his experience watching the 100K final table. He's a mid-stakes kind of reg who grinds, poker, loves the game, loves watching it, and he turned it off. He found it unwatchable to watch the 100K final table, given the series of people who were there. And we had this discussion about who ends up making these, like, through selection process. Guys who are making these 100K final tables tend to be people who are backed, who are excellent at poker, but not necessarily engaging on television, right? And so there seems to be some sort of mutually exclusive thing going on here where people who are, fun to watch on TV aren't generally going to make these final tables, and therefore the product becomes difficult to watch for people because you don't have interesting people there.
Well, take that a step further. Not only, okay, you're not seeing those people at the final table. Do you know why? Because none of them actually played the tournament. Right? Like Phil Hellmuth didn't play the tournament. JRB didn't play the tournament. So no matter what, the final table was going to look similar to what, he described, which is a little more, poker oriented. And I think so there's 2 trains of thought, right? Poker fanatics and poker fans who really love high end poker. I think they love it because they're just watching to see some sick GTO type plays that are like more bluff heavy, which I remember, I don't remember what podcast, but I heard someone say GTO is boring. It's actually not really boring at all. It's quite the opposite because it dictates a hell of a lot more bluffing and a lot more big betting and a lot more gamble than you would expect. But there is no solve anymore for just saying like, oh, we want to have, exciting, fun players at a final table. The only way you do that, and PokerGo does a good job of this, is we have special events like Poker After Dark, where you put lineups like Randall Emmett and JRB and Phil Hellmuth and a bunch of the wilder personalities who are going to drink and have fun. And then, you also have these for those people that are diehard poker fans. There's unfortunately no solve to automatically just put Phil Hellmuth at the final table.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, because, when you look at poker television, Live at the Bike, some of the Poker Go stuff, where they televise sort of maybe not the nosebleed tournament stuff, but maybe cash games, 5-10 cash games, where it's Live at the Bike specifically, where you find a lineup of characters and you get to know these guys and they're crazy and they do stupid shit all the time and it's fun to watch. Production value isn't there quite yet, but those streams, and I wonder if that's maybe the future for poker television, is to go where these guys are rather than, try and fabricate this tournament where you're going to get a bunch of those guys to a final table. Rather than that, why don't we find out where these guys are and go televise it?
Well, I mean, they're bringing them to the studio. The studio is fantastic. If you haven't been in there, it's going to blow your mind that something like this even exists in Las Vegas. And like I said, I think PokerGo is doing, I really have to give them a lot of credit for like really thinking outside the box and trying to offer a wide variety of different, shows. And like whether it's, kind of funny shows that Ali Najad is hosting, like, getting behind the scenes kind of stuff. And I have talked to them about new program creations. Now, the idea, this is mostly Carrie Katz's idea, to create like sort of, the majors, which is the US Open and the Poker Masters. That is just something that if it gains in popularity and somehow we get some added money sponsorship, it could become a little more sexy and a little more interesting. But as far as the players playing in the event, that is just the future of poker right now. Like, we don't have a lot of people that are willing to just put up 100K to entertain you. They're there because a lot of them are getting staked. They need to play well. And part of playing well isn't necessarily going, hey, I'll show you a card. You know, if you fold, I'll show. Like, it's just shut up, don't give away any tells, and try to make good decisions, which, again, isn't like poker circa 2004 where you had Sammy Farha, you know, talking at the table. That's just that era for like high limit tournaments, just over. It's just, you're never going to see that again.
What happened to Sammy Farha? I know you have some history with him. You played some big cash games against him. Where's Sammy?
Sammy, from last I've heard, is in Houston. He occasionally plays in like some private PLO games. And if you don't know, so I know of a game in Houston, which he doesn't play in, but this is interesting, okay? I know this is an actual game. The blinds are 5,100. It's PLO. The guy who runs the game doesn't allow any pros to play. But if you are a pro and want to play, you just have to give him 50% of your earnings. And the rake every hand, it's 50 and 100 blinds. The rake every single hand is $200. Okay,
Wow.
$200 every hand. And every pot is about 10 to 20,000. And if you were a pro that had to give up 50% and play in a game that raked the big blind and 2 small blinds, you would be lucky. You would be blessed to have the opportunity because you are going to make a killing. Now, this isn't me saying that higher rake is better for the record. What I'm saying is when a game like that exists, it typically draws people who don't give one shit about rake. All they care about is getting it in PLO pots and flipping for big money, and they really could care less. And if you had an opportunity to get in that game, that would be a juicy game for you as a pro. But, you know, very few pros play because, you know, it's invite only.
So Sammy hasn't been in Vegas, hasn't played the World Series. He's not around at all anymore?
Yeah, we haven't seen him in Vegas in quite a while, actually.
So actually, that's sort of part of the, I can tie these sort of two themes together about what Daniel just mentioned about gregarious personalities at the poker table and how we're not going to see, a Sammy versus Moneymaker talking, circa 2004, that sort of thing. This is sort of the value of being that type of player. Now, if you're playing like 100K super high rollers against a bunch of GTO bots, like, you actually probably want to limit the amount that you talk at the table, because like these guys, you're opening the veil for yourself to be exploited, essentially, right? Like we had the exploitation versus GTO conversation a couple of weeks ago, so I won't rehash it. But basically, if you're doing a lot of table talk at the table and you're trying to get other people to use table talk and trying to do that, that's fundamentally an exploitive strategy. And if you're really good at it, it can work really well. I mean, just think about actually like the Jamie Gold World Series win, where he essentially second leveled everybody by telling them all the time what he had, and nobody believed him, and therefore he just profited. What you're seeing now is, so Daniel said that Sammy's not in this particular game, but he seems like the kind of guy who could get in that game. And it sounds like the game would be profitable for Sammy. So essentially, like, if you're a personality on TV these days, you're probably giving up a little bit by, being the table talker and potentially exploiting yourself. You're giving in the moment that up. But in things like cash games, those things are super valuable. Like just being like a friendly guy at the table, being a chatty guy at the table, being a guy who's willing to gamble. And we've talked about this in the context, and it doesn't matter from Macau to Houston. These guys are going to be super valuable in games. And JRB is probably not the best GTO bot in the world, but gets in games that other people don't. So just a quick aside on that one.
All right, let's move on. Quickly, Danny mentioned earlier, the World Championship Online Poker also going on now. We are down to the final event, I believe. Well, we're down to the main event. The $5,200 buy-in is three-handed, I believe, at the moment. It drew 1,572 unique entries, 472 re-entries, created a prize pool slightly over the 10 million guaranteed, ensuring 1.6 million for first, a little over $1 million for second. So fantastic. They hit the guarantee. Another great year for the World Championship of Online Poker. One of the interesting topics surrounding the main event was Daniel, was your boy Lex Veldhuis. He made a deep run while he was streaming it on Twitch, and he hit a high point of over 32,000 viewers on his Twitch channel as he was playing the tournament, which was, at the time, it was the second most viewers on the entire Twitch platform, which hosts, some of the best best known video game streamers in the world, which garner huge viewership. So really cool for Lex to be number 2 on the platform while he was doing it. He ends up busting in 58th in a pretty gross spot, blind versus blind. His opponent hit runner. Libri also finished 62nd, so good showing for some of the PokerStars pros there. Daniel, I wanted to get your take on the massive following that Lex Veldhuis has on Twitch.
Well, as you mentioned, the second highest views in the entire platform, the highest viewed poker-specific Twitch stream ever. And when you think about what Twitch streams, they stream a game called Fortnite, which, when Drake was on there, they had like 600,000 people, watching or something like that. So pretty good company, and I think a pretty good sign. And I think you don't find a much better guy that's well suited to streaming than Lex Veldhuis. Like Lex, he has a little bit of an accent, but when he says the word fuck, I just laugh. Like, he doesn't even have to say anything. He's just funny, and he's naturally cool, and he does a great job, and he works really hard. And hopefully we can get him on the show at some point to talk about, for a lot of those people that are aspiring to maybe be Twitch streamers, what does it take? And he will tell you it takes consistency and hard work. And even before him, Jason Somerville, he has an audience, and he's devoted to it, and he's on there grinding every day and trying to keep it fresh and fun. And if you've never streamed, sitting there talking for 10 hours to yourself, that can, make you a little stir crazy. Doing that every day for 2 weeks straight, that is hard work. And so I commend Lex for building his channel and doing a great job. And I'm a big fan of his in general. He's a close friend of mine. So great to see him, as the record holder for the largest Twitch stream ever.
Have you tried streaming, Daniel?
I was the first person ever to stream on stream. I don't know if you knew that. But I'm the only person to stream on stream. I was playing in, where was I? In Barcelona or something. And I was, in the middle of a hand, and I had to go pee. And I'm playing on a laptop. So I brought the laptop to the bathroom. I did my stream while I was streaming, washed my hands, of course, because people are watching. Otherwise, who knows? But, you're home, whatever. So I actually streamed on stream and didn't get banned. And I did enjoy streaming. It's just difficult. Obviously, I live in Las Vegas. So, streaming play money doesn't seem all that worthwhile.
No, sure doesn't. 6 remain only 3 remain, as I mentioned. 2 well-known players, Linus Lolinger and Robert Lipkin, are amongst the 3 that are left. Of note, Sean Deeb won his 2nd event of this year's series and his 6th WCOOP championship title of his career, taking down the $2,100 PLO8, beating out 172 others to do it. And Mr. Timcom, Steve O'Dwyer, finally wins his first World Championship Online Poker event. Even though he's won over $20 million in live tournament earnings, he won his first event in the 2,100 8-max no limit hold'em event. So congratulations go out to those 2 fine fellows.
Remember when there was a time where, you guys will both remember this, when people said oh yeah, that guy's good on the internet, but he can't win at live poker. Remember how quickly nobody says that anymore?
Well, Deeb was the perfect example of that, right? Deeb was the one who crushed online for years and years and years, and took to live poker and struggled out of the box. And I remember interviewing him on our old show when we had him on, sort of as he'd start his live career, and he was admitting that there were some things that were different for him, and it took him a while.
Let's be honest. When Sean Deeb started playing live tournaments, he was horrendous. He was an absolute punter. He was punting 60-yard punts consistently. It would be raise, re-raise, and he'd have king, queen, and move in and be like, I'm blocking kings and queens. I'm like, yeah, but the guy always has aces and you block none of those. It was he was just totally mental. And he's obviously gotten a lot better since, and he's a crusher in all the mixed games, and he seems to be crushing both the WCOOP and Scoop events.
All right, let's move on to the thing that had Mr. Negreanu fired up this week. And this is Cate Hall took to Twitter this week to air her displeasure over a dispute she was having with her cash game backer, who is Chad Power, who also backs several other people in cash games. Now, for those that don't know, we're going to have to go through a bit of a process here to explain how the backing process works. But essentially what happens is there's a backer, and they make an agreement with a player, or this backer would make an agreement with a player to back this person for cash games. And percentages are talked about. Processes if somebody was in makeup, which means if Cate, in this case, plays a bunch of cash game sessions and is down some amount of money, what the process is there for Cate, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of disincentivizing going on. If somebody's stuck 30,000-40,000 playing in cash games, they have to win that much before they get out of makeup and they can make anything. So there needs to be, whenever there's a backing agreement, there needs to be a clear understanding of the rules, which these two seem to agree there was. However, they didn't do it in writing. They did it over the phone, which is odd because Cate's a lawyer. So that part of the story sort of was strange for me, guys. Before we get into too much, I just want to ask you guys, and Daniel specifically, because I know you've done some backing in the past, why you wouldn't put something like this in writing?
Okay, so I mean, I could literally go on for 3 hours, but I'll keep it short. I've been involved in the staking business, both being staked and staking, for 20 plus years. I have never once even considered putting anything in writing. First and foremost, no, it's just ridiculous. You could do it. I guess it's all maybe the new age way of doing that is but when you're entering an agreement like this, trust plays a big role, especially when you talk about cash games, right? If I'm trusting Adam to say, let's say I staked Adam in a cash game and he's playing in Vancouver, you could be stealing from me. I don't know. What the hell is a piece of paper going to do for me in that case? I have to have trust with you, and I have to know that you're, willing to compromise, you're easygoing. If there is any sort of hassle, we'll figure it out. Not hassle, but disagreement on what happened. And typically what I look for when I'm doing staking agreements is win-win situations. Now, this specific one, obviously the bone of contention is Cate Hall has decided to quit poker. And she's leaving Chad with a $60,000 makeup. And the way she described it, she had a bankroll that was big enough to play the 5-10 she already was, but wanted a little bit of comfort in knowing that she had backing, which I think is a horrendous decision. That's besides the point, but really bad decision. If you can afford to play 5-10 and you don't feel safe with your own money, but you feel safe burning somebody else's money, there's an issue there, right? And you're going to also cut your profit in half, which just doesn't make a lot of logical sense long term. But does it hurt any less to lose other people's money? And if so, is that somebody I necessarily want playing for my money, right? So they ended up, getting in this agreement. She wants to quit playing poker, which is totally fine, but she has a $60,000 makeup. And according to Chad, they made an agreement where if he cuts her off, if the number gets big, then she's not liable for it, which is very similar to deals I've made over the years where I've cut people off after they're $200,000 in makeup, and I'm yeah, I'm cutting my losses. You're off the hook. Now, if the horse themselves wants to, get off the stake, I'm no, you don't just get off the stake. You either have to continue to play for me until I say no, or what I typically think is the fair solution, which I'm shocked didn't come out of this, is pay half the makeup. Your $60,000 in makeup, cover your half of it, $30,000, and call it a day. Right. And apparently they hired, they got 2 arbitrators in here, and that solution never came to mind, which is very surprising to me.
I would imagine part of it just has to do with the stubbornness on that. Just both guys kind of, both parties kind of being stubborn on that. I think Daniel hits on a really important point, which is the trust issue, because like you say, you can just claim that you were losing the whole time, and so getting stuff down on paper, I've never really done it either. The only way I would push back a little is it's good to get stuff on paper, only sometimes people don't actually agree on what was said. So in that case, even text messages is probably better than voice, because at least you can kind of scroll back up and said, okay, yeah, actually the number was this, and we agreed this many weeks or whatever. That's probably the only reason I would have to answer Adam's original question to put something in writing. But like you said, this is most of the time, a gambling agreement isn't going to be well enforced by the courts. In some places, gambling debts aren't, you can't legally enforce them. And in other places, they're, even if you could get them to enforce them, they're not going to understand a situation. Daniel mentioned arbitrators. I have no idea whether in this case these arbitrators are legal experts or poker experts. I would, in my case, want poker experts handling this, because they just understand the nuance of this so much better.
Yeah, so there's a huge difference between legal and illegal and morally right and wrong. They're not the same thing. So obviously she's not legally obligated. There's nothing signed. She didn't know shit, right? But morally, ask yourself the question, right? You reached out to this person to stake you. That person put you in some bigger games than you normally play with some real live ones to give you this opportunity, right? Now you've burned $60,000 of this person's money. Not saying, you did anything wrong with your play, but this person's $60,000 out of it. Now you're going to quit and leave them holding the entire bag. Don't you have some feeling of remorse where you want to come to some sort of compromise or say, listen, this sucks for you. Thank you for taking the opportunity of thank you for giving me the opportunity to play on the stake. Like, what can we do here that seems, fair for both of us? And like, how you don't get to splitting the makeup is like beyond me. Like, to think like, is it really okay to just walk away and leave him like holding the bag? I guess legally, but is that somebody that like in the future, I would necessarily want to do, business with in a situation like that? Probably not. So, she took issue with him sort of like, and I found this crazy, like, slandering her or whatever, but all they did was provide the text. And he said, listen, I'm going to share the truth about the way that I viewed things happen. And the discrepancy here, where the arbitrators couldn't come to a conclusion, is whether or not it was clear that if she quit poker entirely, that she would owe the full makeup or not. According to him, it was. According to her, it wasn't. And they don't have any documentation to show that. So it's just really surprising to me that, these two people seem to be friendly, to end it in such a way where you feel as though, this backer gets nothing. Just you're quitting, you're leaving him with holding the bag. And, maybe if you come back to poker again, you'd have to like play under the same agreement or something like that. It's just, it doesn't sit right with me at all. Like, again, legally, I don't care. I'm talking about like what is morally right between friends or between people that typically do business in this kind of situation.
So let me ask you something, just as a hypothetical, and I don't necessarily make the argument that this is an analogous case, but I just want to put this out there to you. I invested in a friend's business a few years back. He said, he was going to make an attempt at making a startup, and he gave me the pitch, and he sent me all his documents. I was like, yeah, this looks like a cool product. I'll throw some money at you, and did all the legal stuff like that, and then he started, having trouble with the company, having trouble turning it profitable, gave it a good run. But ultimately he said, like, look, like, I'm not paying the bills. I got to eat and I got to pay rent. So I'm closing up this business. Like, I gave it my shot as a dream. I'm going to go back to just a regular 9-to-5 job. I didn't at any point think like he'd done anything wrong. I was like, yeah, you win some, you lose some. I bought a lottery ticket. Lottery ticket didn't pay out. Is this, how do you feel about that circumstance? Do you think he owes me any money?
So listen, in the 20 years I've been in poker, I've lived by a philosophy in my life where I always want to make sure that it's long-term business where the other party that I'm involved with feels good about the agreement we made, right? I never want to feel like I'm nickeling and diming people. Like, if I hired somebody to create a course for me on poker, I'm not going to nickel them and dime them on like, you get 22% versus 21%. Like, I'm going to make sure that they feel good about it. That's the same thing I do with the people that I, employ, my assistants, my chef. I want them to be paid so much that they're almost uncomfortable about making too much. And I have a story that, not exactly your story, but relates in that I had a friend of mine who invested in full contact poker when I had my online poker site. And he put up a pretty substantial amount of money. And ultimately, Black Friday happened. We had a very, great opportunity, but then Black Friday happened and sort of killed it. And then I ended up, signing with Poker Stars and, getting a lucrative deal out of that. And so about 2 years later, he reached out to me and said, like, listen, man, I don't know how to, put this, because obviously his investment was gone when full contact poker was gone. But he said, like, listen, to be honest with you, like, I kind of invested in you, Daniel Negreanu, the brand, right? And like, now you've done pretty well with Poker Stars and stuff. And like, I feel like maybe I should get something. So I have a choice here, right? Legally, do I owe him anything? Fuck no. I don't owe him nothing, right? But this is a friend. He's making a reasonable request. I can hear his side. And I want to have good business relationships with people going forward. So I said, sure, what do you think is fair? And we settled on an agreement. I gave him the money because that's how I want to live my life. Not nickel and diming people, not leaving people with like a bad taste in their mouth. And like you with your friend, right? Ask yourself, like you said, you don't feel like this guy did anything wrong, right? So, you come to some sort of compromise where you both agree that like, yeah, that seems like a fair deal. That's how all this stuff should always end up. Compromise.
So does anyone have an issue with Chad agreeing to arbitration and whatever the results come out of that, and when it doesn't go his way necessarily, him taking to Twitter to sort of out things? And I don't know the exact timeline with Cate and Chad and who came out first, but it's my impression that Chad came out and wanted to sort of slander her name, and after he loses the arbitration. Anybody have an issue with that?
Yeah, well, so there's two parts to that. Sorry, I'll let you jump in a second.
No,
there's two parts to that. If you agree to arbitrators and you're going to do like abide by whatever decision they make, then you have to do that and pay that money. Now, that doesn't have any caveat where you can't later say, publicly and show people, check this out. Look how I just got fucked in a business deal with this person who I gave an opportunity to. She approached me, I helped her out and left me with the bag open. I don't have any problem with him telling his side of the story. Like, did he sign a non-disclosure where he can't share it? He certainly has to abide by the arbitrator decision, but there's no gag order on him. I didn't see any part of that.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm glad you went first, actually, because I started off thinking, yeah, it's kind of dickish for him to do that, to air his dirty laundry after agreeing to settle to the arbitration. But then I sort of thought about it, and it's like, well, most of the time when you agree to an arbitration, okay, so there's a couple of things that happen. A, you're sort of betting on your side, right? Like you're thinking in the, if I send this to X reasonable people, like they're going to see it my way and therefore rule in my favor. That's why you would agree to put something to arbitration. The second one is if you believe, I guess this is, sorry, I'll say it more accurately. If you believe that the probability of the arbitrator's ruling in your favor is greater than the EV of just kind of continuing to hope that this person does what you feel is the right thing, then you should go to arbitration. It's like a simple sort of EV play. So that being said, if you're in a situation where you think you're stuck and you think you've got no outs and this person's not going to pay you back without arbitration, then you go to arbitration, because getting some money or having potential at some money is better than no money. And so, yeah, I've actually, since Daniel started talking, I actually have come around a bit to the side and sort of started to think, well, he probably agreed to the arbitration because he thought he was going to get, nothing. And then, so now once he decides, once it doesn't go in his favor, yeah, he kind of wants to put it out there. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily do it myself, but it's I don't think it's like the most awful behavior ever.
Daniel, you mentioned earlier that you've been staked and do stake or have staked a lot in the past. The first thing I thought of was what went into your personal decision to be staked, and when was it? Maybe you can give some details if you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, I got a couple good stories here, so I'm gonna give you both, because one of them is real juicy. It's a little bit older, but one more recently. This is kind of funny, and I won't mention the guy's name, but like, this is just if you're being staked by somebody, you don't want to say what this following guy did. Like, it was World Series of Poker. I was staking this guy, and he was showing up late or whatever, which I would have preferred he showed up on time, but it wasn't a big deal. Now he's telling me about a hand history. He's telling me about a poker hand, right? And he's like, yeah, so I was short on chips and I didn't really want to come back after dinner, so I shoved. And I'm like, what? What the fuck, dude? Like, wait a minute. That's my money. You don't get to just be like, yeah, I didn't feel like coming back after dinner. So I ended up cutting off that deal. But that was just like, that was kind of funny to me.
The funny thing is he probably would have done it with his own money too. If like, I feel like if you're the kind of player who would just punt off your backer stack, you're probably in that position because you like punted off your own stack in the past. I'll
tell you what though, for me personally, like, I'm way more likely to punt my own money than somebody else.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, like if I was selling pieces to people, I would never show up late or like, take it nonchalantly or be like, screw it, I don't feel like playing. I'm going to play like my A game.
Like that's why we're not broke. Like that's why we're not broke degens on the rail asking people for money.
Well, there was a time when I was, and that's where we're going back to, right? So right around, probably similar time to when Terrence was coming out to Vegas and stuff like that. I was in and out of money because I played way too high. Like I always want to play the biggest games, and you do that on a short bankroll. No matter how well you play, you're going to end up in bad spots. So there was one point where I was at a low and I didn't know what to do, and I was like, I called my buddy who I was hanging a lot with, was Lane Flack, and Lane Flack at the time was being staked by Ted Forrest, and Ted, was among the best players in the world at the time, and he had money, so he thought, he's like, let me put in a word for with Ted for you, and I was like, okay, sure. What other choices do I have, real? So Ted, now then Lane has been staked by Ted for a while and blowed a ton of money, right? So I meet with Ted for the first opportunity, and he's like, all right, I'm going to LA. There was like the LA Poker Classic, which has a series of $100, $200, $300 buy-in events, and there's cash games to play at the Commerce. And so I meet with him, and he gives me $2,300. And I was like, okay, like what? You want me to go for a month to LA on $2,300? What exactly do you want me to play, right? So, and to make a long story short, I took that $2,300. It was an opportunity. I won a tournament out there for $30,000. I ended up running it up, playing 8160 limit hold'em. I come back from LA with about 55, 60,000. Now I'm playing at Bellagio, and I'm playing 4 and 800 mixed games. I run it up to like 100,000. So we're doing quite well off this $2,000. And now I'm like, my bankroll this sits at about 80,000. Okay. Lane Flack jumps in the game. Now Lane Flack is playing, I'm playing, and Lane Flack is just burning money. Like he's just freaking, he went through a phase, right? And he was just literally lighting it on fire. And I was loaning him money out of, Ted's stake. So I end up loaning Lane like 50,000 in the game, right? I ended up having a bad session where I lost 30,000. So now I'm out of money, right? I'm out of my stake money. So I called Ted and I said, yeah, I gave Lane the 50 and, I'm out. So, can we meet up and, refill? And he's like, sure. And he hands me $2,000. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like, you want me to run it all the way back up again? So it was shocking to me because Lane is burning 50, 100,000 like it's nothing. But for me, he's giving me like 2,000 who's handling responsibly. So you know what I did? I had a little bit of money myself at that point, obviously, off of the stake deal. It's a very small amount, maybe like 4,000 or 5,000. I said, you know what? Thank you for the opportunity, Ted. I'm going to go my own way. And I started playing $100 tournaments at the Orleans on my own money because there wasn't a lot of sense in like getting staked to play higher. I just played my own money and was able to run it up, on my own. But there's another one with these guys because I told you I got a couple. This is really funny because one of the first trips we took, me, Lane, and Ted, was we went over to Vienna. And Ted gave us rules, right? So we got there. We just, you got jet lag when you fly over to Europe. And, we get there at, I don't know, like 7 or 8 p.m. And Ted says, okay, guys, so we want to be smart. Let's not get an early night's sleep tonight, not play too long, like no drinking, and like let's not borrow money from anybody, right? It's like, okay, seems reasonable. I go to bed at like 10 p.m. with Ted. We wake up early in the morning, like 7, 8, or it was like 8 a.m. And we go in there and we see Lane Flack in the biggest game in the room, drunk off his ass, and he owes every single person in the game money. It was just fantastic. Like he broke every possible rule on the very first night there. But Ted loved him so much that I think, he just didn't care because they were like really, really close. And Lane had his own demons with obviously, rules and stuff like that. So those are my couple staking stories from the old days.
Honestly, I think I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of successful poker players or whatever, have that guy, that one guy who you shouldn't be backing or you shouldn't be giving money to, but he's just got you've got a soft spot in your heart for him, and he struggles, and yeah, he's probably a good enough poker player to win if he actually played good all the time, and certainly Lane qualifies as that. But you're just, this is flushing money down the toilet backing this person. I think we all of us have that story.
Well, it didn't make any sense to me because Lane was big loser for him, but he was giving him all this money, right? And all I did was win from him, run it up and make a bunch of money. And it's he gave me the leash where it was only the 2,000. So it was almost like a self-destructive mentality, where I feel like he was on him. Ted was on his own mission to doom, in terms of even the way he was handling that business. Because I was a solid, good horse who was responsible, and Lane clearly at the time was not.
Ted is one of the most fascinating humans I've ever come across in my life. The guy is just, there's so many stories out there about him. I wish somebody would tell them all one day. But yeah, he's an interesting cat. I want to get your just general, Daniel. Do you think you're up career staking? And if so, and give us maybe some of the big victories or that you've had.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I am. There was a couple years in a row during the WPT Championship where Hassan Habib asked me to put him in a $2,500 satellite to play in a $25K, main event, and he won the satellite and ended up coming in second. And the very next year, I had a piece of him and John Fan, both in the same event, and they came third and fourth or something. Then the very next year, I had Kirk Morrison in the same event, who ended up coming in second as well. So I've definitely had periods of good run. The last couple years, the World Series of Poker is probably where I'm the most stuck because, I typically like to help friends who play the mixed games, and the value is much smaller than you would find, especially, in the 2004 era of all those big field no limit events.
Where are all those guys now? Where is Hassan Habib? He was old school, loved Hassan.
Oh, Hassan still plays in cash games, in Vegas occasionally. I think he was around the World Series. Doesn't play tournaments much anymore, but he's always been a guy that I really liked and respected. And, I was happy for him. And of course, he made me a bit of money.
And Adam, what about you? Are you up or down lifetime?
I'm down for sure.
Yeah, me too. I'm down, and I've had a piece of a guy who won the main event.
Yeah, you're part of Greg Raymer, right?
Yeah, small piece, but yeah.
Because he sold it on 2+2. I remember that. And Kirk Morrison. Where's Kirk Morrison?
I think Kirk Morrison was texting me this World Series. I think he wanted to get back into some events or whatever. So he's in between LA and Las Vegas, kind of bouncing around, and I think, finding games where he can.
Gotcha. All right, moving on. Gabe Podgorski did a piece on Poker Central where they interviewed him and they were talking about a topic we've talked a lot about, and that's pros should be focusing on giving recreational players a good experience when they do play in the game. But there was one piece of the interview, Daniel, you wanted to talk about.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's the whole interview as a whole, but essentially near the end, he talks about, I'll quote him, it says, "It seems to me like all the tournament pros are in this big race to the bottom. To me, it's just like crabs in a bucket, and they're all just fighting over their own edge and bad for the economy overall." Before that quote, he talks about, he's like, "You know what I like, man?" He's like, "I prefer, for me, I think it's just better to play with a bunch of rich guys who like to have fun and lose." I'm like, no shit, Sherlock. Like, really? So you'd rather play with people who have lots of money and aren't very good and are non-pros, and like, what do you call that exactly? That's not like edge seeking? Like you're looking for like a good, fair competition. I think that like, I understand the premise, but it's like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, what do you want to do to like entertain these recreational players? Sing and dance for them? Like, I think to a certain degree, when you go over the top by being patronizing to some of these recreationals, they're not stupid. They get it. You know what I mean? Like, they get when you're like being overly nice to them or like trying to make them feel comfortable. So I think it was like his comments. I know that Brent Hanks on his poker podcast, at Poker Central, was very, very unhappy with just sort of the whole interview because it was like kind of a slight at these tournament players. And I think it really came from like a lack of understanding of these people, because all these people, when I play in these high rollers, everyone, Jason Kuhn, Dan Smith, they're all talking, they're engaging, they're fun, they're friendly. They are creating like a friendly environment. So I think he just was essentially talking out of his ass and saying the most obvious things like, hey, it's great for you. I'm happy for you that you have a game where you get to play with a bunch of recreational players who are all rich. But like, you think like tournament players don't want that? It's like, I don't know. It just seemed like kind of, I don't know, clueless and condescending.
All right, let's move on to some tweets.
You're going surfing on the internet.
Our buddy Mike McDonald at Mike McDonald 89 idea: boxing scoring done on the blockchain. You get prestigious rolls based upon proper scoring on prior flights. Retweet in a few hours once the need for this is evident, because there was a fight a couple of days ago. But this brings up this is something for me, Terrence, I wanted to ask you about, because two things in sports fascinate me that still happen. And one is how boxing and to a lesser degree MMA is judged. And two is how dumb NFL head coaches are with game theory. But this one specifically, I wanted to get your take on, Terrence.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the worst idea. By the way, the fight you're referencing, Triple G Canelo, the rematch, fantastic fight. Strongly recommend for people who are maybe like casual boxing fans and like haven't really been following boxing lately. I don't really follow much boxing these days myself, but fantastic fight. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea. I would personally just be fine with judges who are not getting their position based on political appointment. Basically, being a judge in the state of Nevada, where almost every big fight happens, is just basically an idea of like who you know and who your connections are, and you just get paid to be ringside at like events that other people would pay thousands and thousands of dollars to go to. So if we really just had judges who gave a shit and weren't essentially like political appointments, that would probably solve the problem like 90% of the way anyway. But yeah, I mean, it like thinking outside the box. I always like Timex thinking outside the box on things or using blockchain ideas. But really, just like having judges, 3 people who gave a shit, that would be a really good start.
And now that NFL season is here, for anybody interested in shitty coaching decisions, go to the 2+2 thread in the sporting events forum, and there's a thread in there about dumb coaching. And people, will continually post as they watch NFL games where, coaches will punt in 4th and 1 on the opponent's 39 and do just the dumbest shit every year after year. And as a head coach of a team that is worth billions of dollars,
and they themselves are getting paid millions of dollars.
Yeah.
To make terrible decisions.
It's on me how one of these teams hasn't hired a game theory expert yet, because it's fascinating that.
Well, I mean, I think probably they do. I mean, analytics is everywhere in sports. It's just that coaches don't listen to analytics guys. We happen to have a guy on the call who has a little bit of insight into the professional sports side and may or may not be involved with a team that is probably a little bit more on the analytics side. Daniel, can you give us any insight into if any of your beloved Golden Knights success was attributable to the fact that they might actually listen to numbers guys a little bit?
A lot. No, a lot. They actually specifically went after character guys. First and foremost, people that they knew would fit in here, egoless, but also, checking Corsi numbers. For those that don't know hockey, Corsi's like a deeper analytical look. It's sort of how valuable a player is. In the old days, they looked at plus minus, which essentially meant if you're on the ice when a goal is scored, you get -1. If you're on the ice when a goal is scored, you get +1, which is really dumb stat because, you could be in tough assignments against top, opposing players. But like to speak to the NFL coach thing, I think the interesting thing to look at here is while these people likely have access to all this game theory, situations and what the right play is, there is so much more emotional investment in these situations where a coach's decision, he can get like fired over if it goes wrong, and they're simply afraid for the most part of making a decision that's like, oh my God, why would you go for it there when it doesn't work out, right? So rather than actually make the mathematically correct play, they make the safer play. This is true, frankly, across all poker. If you study game theory dictates a bluff percentage that is probably triple what people are bluffing right now. Like very few people are bluffing the right frequency. Most people don't, because you know what? When you do bluff off your chips, you look like an asshole. You look like a dumbass, right? So nobody wants to look like a dumbass or make the dumb play. So they're actually playing incorrectly. It's not all that different. We talk about we're these game theory experts in poker and, we know how to coach football, yet ourselves, we don't even use game theory properly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know who's not afraid to look dumb? Vanessa Selps, right? Like, you guys remember that World Series hand where everybody was like, she blew up, and I have no comment on whether she did. But
it's one of the reasons I admire Vanessa is the fact that she doesn't give a shit. She gives no shits about how she plays a hand. She's going to go with what she thinks makes sense and, fingers up to the world. Yeah,
and it's even beyond poker. I mean, you look at Jeopardy. What the best guys started doing in Jeopardy was bouncing all over the board and just going all in on daily doubles and taking in life, taking a risk to just look really, really dumb often is so often the correct play.
Back to the NFL thing with the NFL coaches. The NFL is such a stupid league because you have such a tiny sample size. So these little decisions mean so much over the course of a season. But some of the coaches like Sean McVay, the youngest coach of the LA Rams, is really turning to analytics, and I think he's going to do really well.
I hope so. I'd like to see it in football. It's driving me crazy every time I watch these games. But all right, I wanted to quickly talk about Daniel Negreanu's Masterclass. Daniel, can you give us an update? Are you producing new videos? Anything new that's come up lately that you might want to chat about?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I get to that, I wanted to step in because I forgot to mention, if you guys want a Platinum Pass, which is $30,000 of value, right? It's $30,000 trip. You get $5,000 expenses. You get to play in the No Limit Hold'em Championship. I have an opportunity to give one away, and I still haven't done that yet. And you still have an opportunity to get involved and also raise some money for charity. And I need you to go to my Twitter, which is @RealKidPoker, and send me a video, 2 minutes or less, and hashtag it Donate with Daniel. And all I want you to do is tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me a little bit about the cause that you want to play for. And then you could win yourself, for simply sending me a 2-minute video, a chance to travel to the Bahamas this January, play with me. I'll obviously be available for any kind of coaching personally on that level. So send in those videos. There's still time. I don't even know when the deadline is. I probably should, but I'll probably be posting about that soon on Twitter. As far as Masterclass goes, the entire course is out and available right now. I've been getting incredibly good feedback. We are going to be doing some one-on-ones as well, which small group kind of stuff. I've done a couple of them already where maybe we get about 12 to 15 students that all have an opportunity over an hour to ask me specific questions. And those opportunities are, I think, a lot more valuable because I can work with the person walking through a hand. So instead of just asking me a question so I had this hand and I did this and I played this, was I right or wrong? Now I can ask follow-ups. I'm saying, okay, so why did you bet this size? And, get people to understanding the right answers for the right reasons, right? And and that's valuable for everyone listening. So I plan to do a lot more of those, but the course is fully available right now. I believe it's 38 different videos on a variety of topics, from physical tells, tournament strategy, betting frequencies, and the like. So you can go to masterclass.com and look for my course, or you can just get the whole package and you have access to everything. If you want to learn how to dance from Usher or sing from Christina Aguilera, you can do that too.
Fantastic. Check it out, masterclass.com. Thanks, guys, for getting together this week. We've got some mail. We'll push it to next week. We're up against the clock here. Thanks to everybody for getting together, and thank you for listening each week. Send us emails, datpokerpod@gmail.com. And when we send out the show tweet, we need you guys to retweet it so we can reach a wider audience. Thanks so much again for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.